quietness, the stillness, the lack of distraction that we need to do the practice isn't always available. Especially if we're living everyday lives. We live in a city. What can you do? It's really hard to find somewhere that's quiet in the city, isn't it? Somewhere where your attention won't get drawn out. We live everyday lives. Our lives are busy. Our attention's getting drawn all over the place. We've got our problems, our worries, our work, our family. Got to be here, got to be there. So when we sit down to meditate, not only is there external noise, there's also internal noise. We have a lot of thinking going on, a lot of settling that needs to happen. Now we can settle that through concentration, but as you notice, that if anything draws your attention outside, the development of the concentration will stop. Yeah. So here lies the problem. So Mahasi Sayadaw introduced a system that we could use that changes this relationship. One, that distraction is not a problem. Now, to develop mindfulness in our practice, what we need to do is we need to continuously reapply our attention and be mindful of what we are experiencing and how we're relating to it in every moment. So the more continuity you can have in your attention, the deeper the practice will actually develop too. So if you notice you're trying to be mindful or you're trying to watch, say your breathing or then relaxing into the body, and your attention wanders off, every time your attention gets drawn away, that momentum stops, doesn't it? And then you've got to bring it back, and then you're in a little bit, you've got to start again. It's like it starts to die back, you've got to keep on going. Die back, going like this. This is because when our attention gets drawn to something other than our meditation object, right, our relationship is changed. The reason is because we're saying, well, our meditation object is what we're concentrating on, what we're being mindful of, but everything else is a problem that needs to go away. And if that goes away, then I can meditate. Yeah? And when we're doing concentration practices, this is exactly the relationship we have. Exactly the relationship. Because we need to unify our attention to one point. So Mahasi Sayadaw, based on the Satipatthana Sutta, discourse by the Buddha on how to develop mindfulness, tried to address this problem. Apparently his teacher actually came up with the system, but Mahasi Sayadaw was the one that made it very, very popular. This system is very suited for people who live lives like ourselves. The whole system is based on getting up that momentum of attention, training to be able to be aware of what you're experiencing in each moment. In this practice, we actually have a different relationship to distraction. Distraction is not, right, the enemy of our practice. Distraction in this system is the content of our practice. So instead of becoming so concentrated that the hindrances to the meditation get suppressed through concentration, what we do is we actually stay with the movement of the mind itself. The system he developed was by having what's called a primary meditation object and secondary meditation objects. So the primary object is the one that you build your concentration up on, right? So you have your primary object. When your attention gets dragged out, You don't ignore the distraction. You don't ignore that. What you do, that is your secondary meditation object. So it's a meditation object. It's not something to be pushed away. So if the sound draws your attention, you place your attention square on that sound and be aware of your relationship to it. And we would have experienced that then. If sound distracts you during the meditation practice, your mind goes to it even if you don't want to, and then internally you'll start verbalizing. Yeah? The internal conversation starts to go on. Yeah? This is what happens. You start having this internal blah, 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 this blah, 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 that. And from that there might be an emotional charge, or there probably is an emotional charge in that conversation of some sort. And so that emotional charge might bring irritation, right? Or it might bring some sort of judgment. You might start judging. Yeah? And then this to and fro dialogue starts going inside your head. We have a big conversation about it. Now normally this dialogue and this conversation would be the end of your meditation practice. Because what happened is your attention, your mindfulness has just collapsed, caught up in the conversation. The feeling of me and my view becomes really strong, right? And well, I wouldn't do that. This all goes on. This feeling becomes really, really strong, and we get lost in it, right? And in this, the practice goes backwards. Basically, our concentration is broken, our mindfulness has collapsed, we've identified with the whole story. In the Mahasi method, when we're watching our meditation object and we get distracted, say to sound, what we do is we plan our attention straight on it, and then we look at that relationship. We watch the verbalizing, we watch the irritation, we watch the judgment. They are now the object of meditation. This is how mindfulness practice works. In watching them, the continuity of our mindfulness is continued. There is no break between watching the primary object, which is the breathing, and watching the second object, which is the distraction. Can you see? Your job is just to be aware, the attention is moved. This is now my object. The sound. I'm feeling irritated. The irritation is now the object. I've started judging it. The judging is it. I feel really righteous. The feeling of righteousness is the object of meditation. I start having conversations in my head about it. The conversation is now the object of meditation. So the trick is to know what is the dominant experience. When you know that, the continuity increases. Just as if we were starting a fire by rubbing two sticks together. In the other method that we were just doing before, if we get distracted, it's like putting the sticks down. Right? The heat that we generated starts to cool off. And that's where you feel the meditation stops progressing and you start going backwards with concentration practice. And there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't want distraction during concentration practice. Yeah? With this method here, because there's primary and secondary objects, it means there is absolutely no such thing as distraction. So you continuously keep rubbing the sticks together and the heat keeps generating. The momentum of the practice keeps on going. So there's no such thing as distraction. All there is a lapse in mindfulness. A lapse in mindfulness. And our job again, if that mindfulness disappears, we get caught in the conversation, is a moment that we notice that we're being caught up in it, we plan our attention straight on it and the momentum continues. We don't worry about going back to the breath just yet. When our attention is no longer drawn to whatever that is, then we come back to the primary object. This is the same for sound, thinking, judgments, likes, dislikes, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, emotions. When your eyes are open, it's the same for seeing, for smelling, for tasting. So this practice, working like this, is building up a different type of concentration. The first practice we were doing was building up a fixed concentration. That means your attention gets absorbed into one thing. And the more absorbed it gets into it, and the more relaxed and still it becomes, the more peaceful and blissful you'll feel. Yeah. And for those of you that have been doing that practice that we just did for a while now, you'll notice it'll get easier and easier to get a bit deeper each time. You finding that? Yeah. You can get to that stillness. With this one, we want distraction. We don't want to be attached to any object. We want distraction. We want change. The type of concentration we're building up is Khanika Samadhi. It's momentary concentration. So by focusing on this, and then this, and then this momentary concentration starts to build. Yeah? It starts to build. As that builds, the concentration builds, you will become more peaceful, more still. The mindfulness becomes very, very strong. But the attention doesn't fix anywhere. The attention doesn't fix anywhere. And the object is not fixed. Does this make sense so far? So what happens with this, when you do this training, it ends up there is no difference between sitting here meditating and changing a nappy. There's no difference between sitting here meditation, arguing with your partner. Absolutely no difference. No difference. You're training the mindfulness to be aware, mindful of your body, mindful of your breathing, primary object, secondary object, wherever your attention goes. So you can walk down the street and still be meditating. You can live your normal life and still be meditating. And this is where the payoff is. This practice transitions into everything. So instead of doing formal practice where you might meditate, I'm sure you meditate 5-6 hours a day in formal concentration practice, you can learn to meditate in every waking moment. And that's what we're training with this. So the method that we used was a method of labelling, and we have touched lightly on labelling before, haven't we? So first I'd like you to start off by just putting your hands on your abdomen. Just allow your breathing to happen naturally. Notice as you breathe in and out, there's movement in your stomach area. At first it might be quite subtle to you because you haven't trained to focus in that area, and of course the concentration at the moment is quite low. But as the concentration grows, the sensations of the movement of the abdomen become stronger and easier to see. So with the method of labelling, the traditional words to use are rising, rising with the breathing in, falling, falling with the breath out. So what you do is you just watch it and you go rising, rising, and as the breath goes out, falling, falling, and just be aware of that feeling of movement in the stomach area. That's your primary object. If you do that, your concentration will start to increase. The reason the abdomen is used and not the tip of the nose is when you watch the breath at the tip of the nose, the breathing becomes more and more subtle, harder to discern. Yeah? So it leads more to fixed concentration, focused concentration. Can you see? when you focus on the sensations of the breathing in the abdomen, right, your awareness actually grows stronger and stronger. And your attention actually goes wider instead of more narrow. Yeah? It actually leads in a different way. A completely different path. So the sensations become more and more obvious to you until they might be like a trail of sensations going up and down, trail of vibrations that you can be very, very clearly aware of. And there is a traditional development of watching breathing at the abdomen that I won't go into today. Now that's your primary object. So at first, when you start the practice, ignore all distractions in the beginning, just to get up that base concentration. Yeah? When you're watching the breathing, and then suddenly I find, oh, I've been off thinking. As soon as you know, not this will happen to anyone here, but as soon as you turn your attention, as soon as you notice that, turn your attention onto the feeling of thinking. What does it feel like to think? What's driving this thought? And use the label thinking, thinking, thinking. So it's like putting a post-it note and say, I'm thinking. I'm watching the breath, I'm thinking. The thinking will probably dissolve, the thought will dissolve, because you're being aware of it. Back to your breathing, rising, falling. There might be a persistent thought that comes up all the time. Your attention goes back to again. Notice what's driving that thought. Oh, planning, or hating, or judging, or wondering, or dreaming. Whatever's driving, there's always some sort of charge. We don't think just randomly. Every thought has an emotional charge behind it. You can identify that charge. What's driving it? Notice there's no interest in what the thinking is about. You notice there's no interest whatsoever. The content of the thought is just pointless. Absolutely pointless. It means nothing. If you get lost in the content of the thought, the meditation practice vanishes, because you'll get caught up in the story. The story in our thinking is different for everyone. The experience of thinking is exactly the same for everyone. Everyone all over the world experiences it exactly the same way. But the content is unique. Yeah? The content will lead you nowhere. It will just lead you around. It's like a dog chasing. Actually, our cat does that. Our cat chases after a tail, never quite catches it. If you get lost in your thinking, it's like a cat chasing after its tail. It's fun. You can keep pouncing after your tail, but you won't quite get it. Yeah? But if you look at what's driving the thought, you'll get somewhere. You'll start to understand yourself, your obsessions. Yeah? Then the thought disappears, come back to the breathing. Suddenly you find your attention, a sound is drawing your attention, say outside. You plant your attention straight on the sound. Don't listen to the story about what the sound's about. In reality, you don't know. You are writing the script. You don't know someone's walking down the hallway. You're just hearing a sound and writing a story about it. Notice your relationship to that sound. There might be the desire, I want this to go away so I can meditate. Yeah? Watch the script. Can't they control their child? Yeah? If it was my child, I would do this. Yeah, kind of like that. Watch all this verbalizing and the constructing of the whole story that comes up. Yeah? Back to the breathing. And so on. Pain in your back. Watch your desire to watch the pain. We have this strong urge to watch pain and not wanting to watch it at the same time. Feel the mental pulling away from it, like you want to jump away. Feeling how you just want to get away from it. You can do the same thing with an itch. Start an itch, put your attention straight on the itch. Watch the desire to scratch it and don't scratch it. See what happens. Very, very interesting. Also watch your tendency to think about things, not only that cause you pleasure, but also to think about things that causes pain as well. We enjoy thinking about things that causes pain as much as we enjoy thinking about things that causes pleasure. Yeah? And you'll see it all the time. People love to talk about what's wrong. And we love to think about it too. We say we don't, but we do. We're obviously getting some sort of perverse pleasure out of our own suffering. It's like in Christianity, the self-flagellation or whatever, like whipping yourself. We tend to do that a lot with our thoughts, don't we? We like to whip ourselves. If I just punish myself enough, I'll be somehow free from whatever relationship I have to this. Somehow I'll cleanse myself by suffering enough. But just remember, every situation you have two choices. You can either suffer or not suffer. They're all optional extra. It's like going to McDonald's. Do you want fries? Fries with that. Yeah? Life is saying, do you want suffering with that? And often we say, yes please, I'll have a double helping. Yeah. That's an optional extra. That doesn't come, suffering doesn't come with life. It is, suffering is not part of it. Suffering is an option. And so this practice allows us to see how we create our own suffering. So it's a simple system of labelling. Rising and falling of the abdomen, rising, rising, falling, falling. Goes to a sound, hearing, hearing. Not liking, not liking. Rising, rising, falling, falling. Thinking, thinking. Planning, planning. Rising, rising. You know, and it just goes on like that. Yeah? Whatever comes up, even if it's not wanting to meditate, not wanting to meditate, not wanting to meditate, rising, rising, this is the practice. So there is nothing. Now this labelling system, this is a training for everyday life. Once you've trained it, you'll go out there and your mind will automatically start meditating and start observing these relationships. And through that you don't get lost in it and it starts to decondition. This is the way it works. Want to give it a go? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I'm going to just start off by closing your eyes over lightly. Just bring your awareness into your body. Just feeling all the sensations in your body. And you can put a gentle label on this feeling of sitting. Sitting, just to remind yourself what you're doing. Notice how the label of sitting really focuses your attention in your body. As you start being aware of your body, you'll notice your movement of the breathing in your abdomen coming up and going down. If you don't notice it, you can stay with the sitting of your body. If you do, just label the in-breath as rising, rising, and the out-breath as falling, falling. If your attention goes out to a sound, it's hearing, hearing. whenever your attention wanders, notice it's wandered and use the appropriate label to describe that wandering. If you're feeling mentally restless, then label that as restless, restless. Mentally sleepy, sleepy, sleepy. What does being sleepy feel like? Start being aware of your body, sitting on the chair, on the floor. Start being aware of sounds around you. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So how'd you go? One thing, or a couple of things to know about that method. Use very gentle labels. Make up your own words, something that actually means something to you. The labels are not your object in meditation. They are a signpost. So never lose sight of what they're pointing to. I'm thinking, or there's thinking. There's irritation. There's anxiousness. There's hearing. Yeah? There's sitting. They're pointing towards an experience. The experience is what the meditation practice will develop on, because the experience is what's real. That's what you're actually experiencing right now. We're using a process of intentionally thinking. You notice labeling is intentional thinking. You can't think two thoughts at once. If you're constantly labeling your experience, constantly saying this is what I'm looking at, the first thing that will happen, it's very hard for any other thoughts to arise unless you forget to label your experience. So you'll find it will actually settle the thinking down. Now this practice is being used right in the midst of it. You're just jumping straight in. But this labeling protects you in that way. Also remember, the point of the labeling is so that you see this is what I'm experiencing, this is how I am relating to it, because that understanding of how you're relating to things is what teaches you about yourself. Labeling causes you to separate from the experience, which means you can be thinking, can be feeling difficult emotions, whatever it is, be feeling desires and longings, but you'll be separate from it. In that separation of labeling, watching, labeling an object, it makes whatever you're experiencing an object, and that way you don't get lost in it. So it loses a lot of its power over you. Through lack of participation, your habitual patterns will start to get weaker. If you don't have a means of separating, which is mindfulness practice, if you're lost in it, you'll keep exercising your habitual ways of reacting, and they'll become stronger. Yeah. Be careful not to use the labels like a machine gun. In my early days I used to use that, and a lot of people use it like that. Trying to shoot the object away, something you don't want to experience. Pain, 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 pain. Something you don't want to experience. Remember, mindfulness practice is about opening up to, not closing yourself off from. But using the labeling like a machine gun can be helpful in everyday life on certain experiences such as obsessive thinking. If you've got an obsessive thought and you don't feel strong enough to be with the emotional charge behind it, be with the feeling behind it, these thinking that just get you into trouble all the time, what you can do is you go thinking, just silently. If you do it out loud, you get locked up or medicalised in some way, won't you? They'll put you on some sort of drug. But do it silently to yourself, and that intentional thinking will remove that thought. It will block it, and it will come up again. Do it again. Dum, dum, dum. Just keep blocking it off. You can also use the same thing as thought replacement. If you start thinking, geez, they're such a terrible person, you can intentionally think an opposite thought. You know, I wish them happiness and peace. You can replace it. Be careful of this obsessive thinking and where it leads, because that sort of thinking will lead to your pain. Not the other person's pain, to your pain every single time. But you can use it like that, but be careful when you're doing the formal practice, right? You're better off being with things rather than trying to suppress things, because that's suppressing.